All yours.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call to order the September 27th, 2022 meeting of the Oregon City Historic Review Board to order. First, I will ask if there are any public comments not related to items on the agenda this evening. Okay, hearing that there are none, I will move into the public hearing portion of the agenda. There are two public hearings on land use applications scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Historic Review Board are to be unbiased. Before the start of each hearing, I will ask the Historic Review Board members whether they have any potential conflicts such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the Historic Review Board members have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any Historic Review Board member about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Historic Review Board will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Historic Review Board website. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address as well. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe there are other criteria that apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If you intend for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in your oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to staff while the record is still open. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or the Land Use Board of Appeals or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we will open the record for Oregon City file number GLUA 22-00031, HR 22-00010, exterior alterations to an approved project, the columns at 1020 5th Street. I'll now ask each Historic Review Board member if they've had any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, and whether they visited the site and noted any relevant information. Board Member Edgar.
I have no conflicts of interest. I visited the site previously and I've driven by it many times on trips up the hill. I have no contact with anyone that on it, and I have nothing to worry about or nothing to announce.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Ferry.
I visited the site. I have no conflicts of interest and I have no ex parte contact.
Board Member Stobie.
I have no conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact, and I have visited the site.
Okay. And finally, I also have had no ex parte contacts, have no conflicts of interest. I have visited the site, and the one thing I've noted, I guess, in addition to the columns, is that I do have questions about whether some of the other exterior items on the house were built to the approved plans. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the Historic Review Board members about these disclosures? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and commence with the staff report and turn it back over to Christina.
All right, thank you, Chair Blythe. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for the first proposal, which is a proposal for the addition of columns on the front elevation. So I'm going to open up the staff report and just go through a couple of the photos and then kind of provide my general overview and recommendation. So just one second. So there are two applications this evening for the same site. They were broken up to allow them to kind of be approved separately if one was more complicated than the other. And so this is exterior alteration to an approved project. At this time, it is just the columns, but with the comment by Chair Blythe, I would be interested to this would be interesting if there are additional comments related to exterior alterations to the site that were not addressed as part of the previous review a year ago. This may be a good bucket to put that in. So I'll just hold that comment, but I'm going to scroll down. This proposal only has two recommended conditions of approval relating to that the column should be painted to match the final color palette of the building. And of course, the applicant is required to get all building permits that are applicable for the installation of the columns. So I'm going to scroll down. And as always, the site is located at the edge of the Conservation District on 5th Street and unbuilt John Adams. It is on a heavily sloped lot and the kind of cross slopes both down the hill and from the back of the property forward. It is zoned mixed use corridor. And I am going to, this is a photo of the kind of existing condition taken last week. The applicant had provided a fair amount of different elevation drawings or renderings as it relates to the original 2020 approval. And there was question and not enough clarity to determine if the board approved rounded columns rather than square columns for this application. So staff recommended that this be reposted and the board review the proposal to put columns where you see the existing wood posts. So I'm going to scroll down. This is what you see from the elevation that the board saw in 2020. And as you can see, it's a little vague if these are rounded or square posts. There is a kind of a 3D sketch that shows rounded columns, but there's not clear exactly what was proposed and approved. The applicant has proposed 12-inch kind of molded fiberglass columns that would go around the posts that are there and would be painted to match the house. I'm going to scroll down. So with the findings, Staff has provided the following paragraph. The applicant is modifying an approved design with a design element that is found within the district. The applicant provided lots of photos showing rounded columns throughout the district. While not evident on the few four-square houses in the McLaughlin Conservation District, it is a column element in Queen Anne vernacular, and bungalow homes in the district. These home types were built between the 1890s and 1920s, and four squares in Oregon were generally constructed between 1900 and 1915 as a general sideboard date, and have evidence of the use of rounded columns as a design approach outside the city. The lack of rounded columns in four-square buildings in the McLaughlin Conservation District derives more from the small number of buildings as a sample size than a specific design decision of Oregon City. We only have 2 or 3 four squares in the city, so those 3 don't have rounded columns, but the district does have a fair example of rounded columns within the dates of when the four-square design was built. So staff is recommending approval for this proposal with those 2 conditions, which is paint the columns to match the paint scheme of the house and get building permits as required. So I'm available for any questions the board may have, as well as any questions related to other exterior alterations that may be, I'm going to scroll back up again, that may be integrated into this potential proposal. So any of the HRB members have questions?
I do have a few, but I'll defer to the rest of the board first, if anyone has. So I guess my question is, one thing that I noticed in doing site visit was that the dormers on both the front and then the side facade don't appear to match what was approved in the modification of HR 20-00001 that was reviewed at the November 2021 meeting of the Historic Review Board. So specifically, it appears that the siding continues straight up all the way to the dormers, and there's a break in the roof line, I guess, that's not reflected in the plans. So that stood out to me as it kind of increases the massing of those and the height of those sides, you know, whereas the roof line kind of serves to break up some of that size. So that was concerning to me. And I guess I was curious if this review came up because of a review or inspection and noticing that the columns didn't match, or and if there was any kind of more comprehensive review of the site and whether it matched the plans that were approved. So
those are good questions. I have not done a comprehensive review. That would be kind of done as the applicant is ready to move forward, but that your comment is good to hear, and I'll kind of talk to the applicant about what they want to do, what next steps for that. This came as a request of the applicant, and I went back as staff and looking at the approved plans, it was gray enough that I didn't think the plans gave clear direction about square versus round columns. So I recommended that this be noticed.
Okay, thanks. Then I guess we'll go ahead, unless any other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to the public comment portion and open it up to the applicant. Just as a reminder on process, the applicant has up to 15 minutes, though you don't need to use that all, of course. Representatives of recognized neighborhood associations, government agencies, or other public interest organizations will have up to 5 minutes, individuals up to 3, and then the applicant will have up to 5 minutes for rebuttal. So then we'll go ahead and invite the applicant to speak. If you can state your name and place of residence, please.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, John.
Yes, okay. So my name is John Delson, Delson Engineering, Inc. I'm the design engineer and engineer of record on this project. And we examine all the possibilities to address the issues or questions with the ramp. But I think first we will start with the columns, right? So the columns, we never specified, to be honest, if this should be rounded or square. In my mind, it didn't make any difference. We were leaning towards the round column. So the drawings have never specified one way or the other. And we felt that since it has been designed, I mean approved, per this design, per this the drawings, there would be never issue. The builder wanted to double check everything prior to construction, so that's why he raised this question. Only the architectural rendering, artistic rendering, was kind of vague, leaning one way or the other. But we, again, our understanding is that the round column has never been issue with this type of style. So this is a simple comment about the columns, and I will leave up to the HRB to discuss, or if anybody has more specific questions about that. We understand, I just want to highlight that we understand that examining similar designs and similar throughout the states and in this district, that people were always free to use one way or the other. The base of the column and the cap is square. The column is rounded. It appears to be more pleasing aesthetically from architectural point of view. So the owner and the builder leaning towards this solution. Now talking about the ramp.
Oh, hey, John, we're going to do the ramp in a second proposal. So we're doing the columns first, and then we'll come back and do a presentation with the ramp.
Oh, okay. So again, my understanding was, or our understanding was that basically the shape of the column is not a significant issue, but that's all what I have to say about the columns. Do we have any questions? Are there any questions about this?
Thanks, John. No questions from me. Any questions from other board members?
I have a question. It looks like the outside columns are both up on piers. Will that still be the case? It doesn't seem like any sort of support for that has been built, or are you planning on adding that as well? So the outside columns, the farthest on the outside, will be shorter because they'll be up on piers. Is that right?
Oh, yes, we can do this. Again, we will be listening to your comments or your preference.
I was just wondering.
Such a small detail. If you guys feel that this would be more appropriate, we can create. These are short pony walls.
Well, it looks like that's what is happening in your drawing. That's underneath.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we can definitely do that. Yeah.
That was my only question.
Yes.
Okay.
So those things, if I can add, those things are kind of a preference issue. As you see on this drawing, this was the very first rendering or elevation. We have like a small roof, which dictates there's 3 windows above the entry door and above this little roof. Had to be smaller. Okay. However, according to HRB recommendation, this lower roof had to be eliminated. So this allows us to have on the upper level all windows the same size. And we feel that this is a small detail adjustments. We are happy with this. So we feel the same about the shape of the column or these little pony walls at each end, left and right side. If you feel like this is more aesthetically correct, then we can do something like that.
I'm noticing right now that the roof that you've constructed, the porch roof that you've constructed is wider. It actually extends out past the side of the house. And the design that is reflected in this drawing, it does not. So you can see that the roof, in effect, the porch roof is actually wider in length or in width.
Yes, because from a building code point of view, the columns, this is to take care of the lateral issues. And this building has to be designed for 120 miles an hour wind. As we know, in the past, 40 or 50 years ago, there was no consideration whatsoever about the lateral design. But to meet the current code, we have to restrict left to right movement. Okay, so that's why we place the columns not like a foot or 2 feet from the edge. We placed at the edge of the building. Okay, this way we can provide the tie downs to the building, and out of plane forces can be restricted or resisted by these tie downs. This is the most common, if not the only way to do it in presently designed buildings. And the same way happened here. To meet the code, we push these columns to the edge, okay, to flash up with the building. So therefore, the overhang had to be created past the column, of course.
But that in effect is a change to what was approved in the original design.
Correct. As you see, the column is flush with the right and the right side of the building. Yeah.
So the question is, are we approving then the redesign of that roof at the same time with the columns?
While the board is talking, let me go grab what you're seeing as the original 2020 approval. Let me go grab the 2021 approval while we're talking. 1 second.
Thank you.
One second.
Sure. While staff is grabbing that, I guess we can go ahead and ask if there are any other public comments on this application.
Wendy has her hand up.
Wendy, go ahead if you could state your name and place of residence, and then if you're representing either yourself or it looks like potentially you're representing the neighborhood association.
I didn't have my hand up and I don't see it up here. I'm Wendy Marshall. I am a resident of Oregon City, but I'm speaking on behalf of McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. And on the case of the columns, we're going to concur with whatever staff and HRB decide on this one. Thank you.
thanks. Is there
All
any
right.
other public comments on this application for the column specifically?
All right, and 1 second, I found the elevation that the board may want to see. So when you're ready, I can share that.
Yeah, given that we've
Okay.
taken all public comment, I think we're ready for
Okay.
discussion.
Just so you know, this is from the applicant's revised submittal in November of 21, which was kind of in the middle of the process for the both ADA ramp request and the alterations to the windows. And as you see, this is what was proposed. So the applicant ideally would have asked staff that they were building something different that was proposed. I could have sent this back up for review, but this is what was proposed in the November front elevation. And I'll add this to the record since it's been shown on the screen today.
Okay.
So I can stop share or keep it up if that's helpful.
So I guess we can go around the board for comment. Preliminarily, I think the columns themselves are not very controversial. I think both round or square columns, from my perspective, are acceptable for a 4-square style house. So I personally have no issue with round or square. And we've run into this issue before where these 2D drawings don't make it clear whether they're square or round in the first place, because they can kind of be either from this perspective. But I think the key question for the board will be to scope exactly what we're approving tonight for this application. If we're approving the expansion of the porch width, which I guess from my perspective is not too objectionable, but looking at the photos and looking at this drawing, I see other issues with the roof that are not consistent with the drawing here. And so I guess if we're approving just the porch and the columns, or that we should try to kind of clearly specify exactly what's being approved in this application. On that, I guess I'll go around the board. Paul, do you have any comments?
I agree with you and what the staff has requested on the columns. I think that's they're okay. However, the roof over the porch is significantly different, and I think that it should be potentially held back so we can do a more thorough examination to see if there are other issues that should be brought up together with maybe the porch roof. And maybe it's time for a continuous, so that for a period, if they would agree to it, to allow us to do a more thorough examination of comparing what has been approved by the HRB and making sure that what we've approved is actually what's happening.
Thanks, Board Member Edgar. Board Member Ferry, any comments?
I don't, I agree with you, Chair Blythe, that I think that either round or square columns are appropriate. I do like the little piers. I know on a lot of 4-square style, they have the little pier that the columns sit on. And I think that that's very stylistically appropriate. And for a house that's kind of gone a little stylistically out of the realm of what a 4-square is, it would be nice to see that element on the porch continued. So As far as round or square, it doesn't matter to me. I do really like the the piers that the columns are sitting on, though. I'd like to make sure that that is kept.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on the porch roof?
You know, it didn't stand out to me as far as it stands currently. I don't see it being that outrageous of a change. I do think we should have a talk about the roof. I don't know if this is the time to do that or if that should be a later thing.
Okay, thanks. And board member Stobie?
I don't have any issues with round or square columns. I like the piers. I agree with Sabrina. As far as anything outside of the columns, or whether it's the porch roof or other issues, potential issues, I think an audit should occur based on what what's happened or what's been completed versus what we actually approved. But I don't think it's appropriate here. I think that needs to be a separate conversation between Christina and the applicant.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we have consensus on the columns, definitely. Do we have consensus to approve the change to the porch roof with that as kind of one small package? Or do we want to, I guess I see the options as approving kind of the porch columns and roofs today and then leaving any other issues separately,
Sharing.
or potentially we could continue the entire application and ask for a more comprehensive list of all the changes. I think I'm inclined to say that we could, from my perspective, I would approve the columns and the porch roof, as I didn't even notice it really when I visited the site until I went back and just now looked at the drawing. So I don't see that it stands out too much. So I would be up for approving that, and then asking for a look at the rest of the project to see if the rest of it meets the application.
I can concur with that.
I have one recommendation to add a condition of approval that indicates that the piers be as proposed in the original 2020 proposal be included in the concrete Poniewall piers. So I can write that out while everyone's talking. So give me a second.
I think I agree that we could put the porch roof in with the columns, but I think that we should have a separate conversation about other changes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Christina, do you want to maybe add that as a note in the conditions of approval that the porch roof is approved as well?
Yeah. I'm writing something and I'm going to share this my screen. Just one moment. Okay. Sorry. One second. I lost my lighting, so I'm gonna turn it on. I need to reword that because it doesn't really work out, but the new condition number 4 includes the porch post. One second. So we have we have the applicant shall paint the columns. 2, those are the original 3. The applicant should include the pony wall porch base on the edges of the porch as depicted in the approved plans. And the approval includes the revised porch designs depicted in the staff report on. And I have a figure for that staff report. One second. It is figure 4. That's what I was looking for. Okay. Those are the 2 additional conditions of approval for this. If that is helpful.
I think that looks good to me.
All right, is anybody ready for a motion?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and close the public record for a comment on this application and move to the motion. Paul, I think you're on mute, Paul.
I move to approve the staff report with conditions of approval for the columns and the roof.
So HR 20-10 as revised.
As revised, HR
I'll second.
20-10.
Okay, I'll call the vote. Board Member Ferry,
Aye.
Board Member Stobie,
Aye.
Board Member Edgar,
Aye.
Chair Blythe.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, so I will send out that staff report and I will have a conversation with the applicant on what additional revisions may be needed. And you may see a secondary notice that will come once again, kind of separate, I think, from this ramp proposal, which is, I think, the best way for the applicant to separate out the issue if they want.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I'm gonna stop share.
Okay. Now then we'll go ahead and move on to the second public hearing for this evening and open the public record for Oregon City file number GLUA 2231, HR 2211, resubmission for a full ADA ramp modification of HR 21, 10 at 1025th Street. Since this is the same project, go ahead and just take the board members' previous declarations as consensus unless anyone has any modifications to make. Hearing none, ask if anyone in the audience wishes to question any of the historic review board members' previous disclosures. All right, hearing none, then we'll turn it back over to staff for the staff report on this application.
Thank you. Okay, I do have a presentation for this one, so give me 1 second. I will. Okay. And I'm going to from the beginning. All right. So this is a proposal specifically for exterior modification to the original HR 2001. And it's a resubmission for the full ADA ramp with some modifications from the last time you saw this. So my goal tonight is to go over the revisions, provide some context of what the board should be looking at as they review this, and my recommendation for next steps. So I have 4 items that will be entered into the record this evening, and they were all sent to you, to the board members and to the applicant this afternoon. One is an email from Jylene Maudlin, a letter from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. I took a fair amount of staff photos today, and I just wanted to enter them all into the record. Some are in this presentation and some are not, but just add them all on the record, as well as a webpage that talks about the costing for stair lifts, internal stair lift inside a stair. And I wanted to pass this on to the record because this website provides a lot of detail and some cost numbers that we haven't really been able to talk about in alternatives analysis. So I wanted to add that to the record. So we'll be talking a lot about different proposals and applications that came through. So this slide kind of talks about the 3 applications and the 2 previous reviews. So the original review happened at HR 20-01 or 001, and that was the initial approval of the live work. It resulted with an approval with conditions, but had at-grade stairs on the side entrance. The applicant subsequently came back a year later with HR 2120, which was reviewed by the Historic Review Board. The board approved a shorter ADA ramp just to the side door and denied the larger ADA ramp to the rear of the building. That was appealed, and the City Commission upheld the Historic Review Board's decision. So the applicant is back with a slightly revised full day ADA ramp proposal. It has generally the same length or depth. I've tried to use the word depth as it relates to the depth of the building, whereas the length may be the actual grade length of the ramp. So whenever I can, I try to use the word depth as it relates to how much deeper the ramp is as is attached to the building. So to give you some context, we really have a balance of historic preservation and the Americans with Disabilities Act. The question for the Historic Review Board is whether this design proposal appropriately balances ADA accessibility and the McLaughlin Conservation District protections. Providing access for wheelchairs and accommodation contemplated by the ADA, but that fact alone is inadequate to justify the proposed ramp design and configuration without further analysis on its impact to the significance of the McLaughlin Conservation District. So as you look at, as you review this proposal, both tonight and in future meetings, how is the city balancing both the needs for the American with Disabilities Act and historic preservation? And it is a balance of those 2 requirements. And really what the board can do is take a look at, and has the applicant looked at alternatives to what's proposed, and how can the board, through conditions of approval, mitigate to the best of their ability adverse effect on the district? So this is an infill to a conservation district, but we do have some guidance provided us by the National Park Service. They do have a preservation brief 32, which is attached to the staff report. And it really looks at how and when should you put ADA ramps for historic resources. So even though this is an infill project and not a historic resource, we can read the preservation brief with an understanding that the McLaughlin Conservation District is the resource, and how would this ADA ramp be best located to mitigate its impact on the district. So the brief provides kind of 3 questions to look at. 1, identify the character defining feature of the resource, so of the district. Identify the required level of accessibility, which is proposed by the applicant, and evaluate accessibility options within a preservation context. So they provide in this brief some direction. Ramps should be carefully designed and appropriately located to preserve a property's historic character, or in this case, a district's historic character. Ramps should be located preferably where there is minimal change in grade. And often the type and quality of the materials determines how compatible a ramp design will be with an historic property, in this case, an historic district. To provide a little overview, the site is located at the edge of the McLaughlin Conservation District. In this case, there are not any directly abutting historically designated resources, but it is within a district with many designated resources. The property is zoned mixed-use corridor, and as you've seen from the slides before, this definitely has a sloping lot and a cross slope, both from the back to the front and from one side to the other on the front. Here are some new photos taken today, kind of looking at really what the board should be tasked to do is how the design of the ADA ramp or any of the alternatives looked at mitigate any impact it may have on the significance of the district. So in previous applications, I don't think we've had these two shots, and these are really looking at up the street at the intersection of 5th and Monroe, both on one side and the other of 5th Street at Monroe. So this provides some contact photos. Here's some photos from the top of the hill looking at this project, and at a future side, the applicant has submitted kind of a slope analysis for if it would be feasible to provide an AD ramp on the upslope, which was one of the alternatives reviewed. And there's not a great photo that perfectly shows it, but I have two, and this kind of shows the grade that it's at the sidewalk. And of course, there is a retaining wall on the side as it relates to the driveway. And then I have one more photo kind of showing this is the upslope area. So in a future slide, you'll see the study that looks at the slope study of what it would take to get an ADA ramp on this upslope side. Just to remind everybody, the original approval in 2001 had the at-grade side door entrance. So I just wanted to keep this slide in to understand what was originally proposed and approved by the board. The previous approval and the previous review of the full day ADA ramp in HR 21-20 and the subsequent appeal, one of the major findings the board had was the addition of the switchbacks either further elongated a 4-square building that was already kind of at its max length and depth. And so you have the layout of how the switchbacks relates to the length of the house. This shows the new proposal. So the applicant looked at a redesign to reduce the amount of switchbacks. And there is not really a net change in the depth, but what they have done is provided kind of these ramp landings that allowed them to remove 2 of the switchbacks. So there is now 3 switchbacks and an open area that potentially could have planting, but you would head this way, and then up. So the depth hasn't changed, but the number of switchbacks have changed in this proposal. This is the new both side elevation and rear elevation. The applicant has also proposed a covering for the side door. Right now there's a very small little covering for the side door. And I encourage them to draw up what they would want for a side door entry to cover the side door, even on the original ramp that was approved for the side door ADA ramp. So you can see here their proposal. I'm going to move to the next slide. This is the applicant's attempt at looking at a slope analysis. So this is the up slope portion, if this is Fifth, and looking at how this would need to be done for the slope, and I'll let the applicant provide additional commentary on that. They did not provide much information in their narrative explaining this alternative analysis. So I encourage them to speak more about this tonight, but also in their revised narrative to provide more written comments about how this analysis showed the complexities of an upslope ADA ramp. So in the last round, both the Historic Review Board and the City Commission really wanted to see the applicant do an alternative analysis to show that the proposed rear entry ADA ramp full length was the kind of only option available to them. And they provided 8 questions, which I reposted in the staff report and provided staff commentary on the level of findings the applicant has submitted to date on each one and what they would need to submit to show that they've done the level of analysis for each option. And so this is provided both in the staff report and on this slide. The applicant has submitted some findings for some of the options, but not all, and none of them have provided kind of an alternative analysis approach with detail enough for both the Historic Review Board, I think, and staff to show that they have gone through and shown how each option is not optimal for the proposal, and that they are choosing the option that has the least, that's the best option out of the 8 as regards to impact to the district and feasibility for the applicant, right? It's that balance of that scale again. So what option provides accessibility for the applicant, but the least impact on the district? And so with this application, staff found that the applicant has not provided sufficient findings for an alternative analysis for the larger ramp, and as laid out in the staff report, what the applicant would need to submit to show that they've done an alternatives analysis that is in depth enough for the Historic Review Board to start making those findings of what is the balance of those 2 needs, accessibility and impact to the district. And so staff's recommendation this evening is that the applicant extend the 120-day date by 30 days and return at the October 25th Historic Review Board meeting with findings that fully address the Historic Review Board and City Commission's alternative analysis questions. And at that point, if the applicant has provided those findings, the board can start the deliberations of what is the balance and what conditions would need to be placed on the proposal. And at this time, I'd like to pass it over, and I'm going to stop share, to Carrie Richter, our Assistant City Attorney, who can provide a little bit more guidance on how the board should be balancing both the ADA and the Historic Review Board's design guidelines for new construction.
Thanks, Christina. This is Carrie Richter, the Deputy City Attorney, and I just want to offer a few additional observations. As Christina mentioned, we're not talking about a contributing structure. We're talking about a new structure in a conservation district. So we're looking at, so I think the threshold proposition is, how do we design this ramp so as not to compromise the significance of the historic district? And if it turns out that it cannot be done, then we're going to have to minimize the impact to the degree that we can, because we have got an obligation under the ADA to provide equal access to buildings. And that makes this application, because it is an application protected by the ADA, more strenuous obligation on the HRB and the city generally than other types of reviews, because this is a right that is protected. But I don't think we are yet to the place where we have enough evidence to determine the degree to which this compromises the district, because we haven't exhausted the alternatives. And I think that we look at the guidelines, and the guidelines talk about using compatible styles, and that the use of other styles dilutes and detracts from the historic context of the district, right? And if we look at what the HRB found before, they found that a building depth that is 18 or so feet longer than the original proposal compromised the Foursquare style. And I don't know that what the applicant has proposed, which is still the same depth, changes that analysis. The planter may do something to mitigate the visual impact to for the properties to the rear, but it doesn't deal with, I think, what the HRB's concerns were with respect to Fifth Avenue. And so I think we've got to unpack that more. And that's why I think, Christina, I included some photographs that provided some additional context so that the HRB could evaluate the degree to which this proposal or any proposal for a ramp in this area of the house would compromise the district. So I think that that's the task at hand. And I just don't think we've got enough information to do that right now. But I think that's the obligation of the HRB.
So Chair Blythe, let me know if Historic Review Board has any questions for staff or Ms. Richter before we open it or back up to the applicant. Oh, I think you're on mute. There you go.
I guess for Ms. Richter, maybe I would appreciate if maybe you can expand a little bit on the obligations under the ADA and how they apply to the structure, you know, from a not expert view. You know, my layperson's understanding is that, you know, that normally applies to public access buildings, but not to private residences. However, this is the applicant applying to the city for the accommodation. So how does that play into it here? And then I think there's also some elements of that comments that were in the application about a kind of residential grade accommodations versus a higher level of commercial grade accommodations, and how that applies to this being a residential application.
Sure. So the general starting point is that accommodation idea generally runs to publicly accessible buildings, right? That's the thing you just pointed out. There is no obligation that all residential structures have accommodations if the owner doesn't elect to include them. So that sort of general concept of ADA accessibility that runs with publicly accessible buildings doesn't apply to residences. But the city has an obligation as a reviewer of an application with a request for an accommodation to do everything it can to ensure equal access, right? So the city has an independent obligation as the reviewer of such a request to ensure that that happens. And if that means that certain guidelines cannot be satisfied, then that is what it means. It means that the ADA at the end of the day will trump local preservation protections. That is what the law says. But that trumping does not occur until the HRB is satisfied that mitigation has occurred to the greatest degree possible, that alternatives have been exhausted, that the cost of an elevator is indeed more than the cost of a ramp, that chairlift, a residential scale chairlift that you would expect to find in a residence, is not going to be suitable to serve this family. So that balancing hasn't happened yet, and it needs to, before the HRB or the city should say, the design guidelines must give way. If that makes sense. And I'm happy to clarify or answer any other further questions.
Yeah, I wanted to add the sense that it is well within the HRB's right to condition mitigation, design changes to the ramp that make it more compatible to the district. So those are kind of this conversation that the board can have kind of once we have the alternative analysis findings in hand to a level that the board can make those decisions. Paul is raising his hand, sorry.
If I can, I would like to ask Carrie, does this mean that we have to guarantee ADA access to all floors or levels of this building? So as an example, we have a basement. Do we have to, are we saying that the basement or the lowest level or the main floor or the second floor or a fourth floor, we have to create ADA access to throughout the whole building?
We have to provide reasonable access to the residents, and as I understand it, the residence exists on the third floor. That's where what is on the third floor?
Second and third floor are the residents.
So it's where residents, so we have to provide access to where residents. Was that part of the original design plan? To have,
There was no ADA ramp in the original design plan. The original design plan showed access to the second and third floors via stairs from the side entry.
but you're saying though, that because they're residents, and I just want to make sure that that all of that's the areas that they are identifying as residents were originally identified as residents in the design plans.
What significance would that have if it were true?
The significance is that if we provide access to the second floor, and it's a simple straight access to the second floor, is that adequate without extending it and up and up and up to get to the third floor? So or if we get it to the first floor and the second floor, and they have ADA access, is that adequate?
The applicant has asked for ADA access to the third floor. So we have an obligation to review a proposal with access to the third floor. We can't,
Second floor.
we have to review the application that has been submitted. And whether or not it was originally proposed that way or not, we have an application for a ramp that gets you a certain place. And we can't cut that back because of some reason when the applicant has claimed that access to that area is necessary under the ADA.
Any other questions for staff? I had maybe one more, but I'll wait for anyone else.
Well, I was wondering, Grant, if Carrie addressed your second question regarding the live work.
Can you restate the question? I must have missed it. I must have missed it. Sorry.
I think you did touch on it in terms of it being residential versus commercial grade type of access, and whether there's different levels of requirements and that would impact. So that there were some comments that in the application that a residential grade chairlift wasn't acceptable to the applicant, but how if they're wanting to meet a higher level of commercial design requirements, how that impacts this being a residential application, if that question makes sense.
So my understanding, Chair Blythe, is that the applicant has said that a commercial grade elevator is too expensive and the building is designed. And so a commercial grade elevator won't work. My understanding of the application is that the applicant has said that a residential grade chair lift, which I am envisioning as a chair that sits on an existing stairwell and moves people up. And I may be misunderstanding what the term of art is, but that's my impression of what a residential, you retrofit existing stairs to accommodate a lift. Is that the applicant's identified concerns, as I understand them, are concerns about power, about the need to have, about access and during loss of power, and what happens in those circumstances. I don't think that the alternatives analysis is constrained in the objective by residential versus commercial. Certainly, commercial ADA access is required for the work part of this building because it is publicly accessible. Right? But I don't think that the upstairs access needs to be served by a commercial access. I believe it could be, unless the applicant explains why residential scale access is insufficient. The testimony we received is that there is an elderly house member and potentially some family that are disabled and need access. That's what we have. That's the evidence that we have received.
Great. And I guess my one final question, maybe for Christina, was whether we have any confirmation that this design as submitted would be compliant with the ADA requirements. I don't know if there's anyone on city staff that's versed in that and has reviewed it.
No, it would have to be submitted to our building department for review, and it has not been done yet.
Okay. I guess specifically my impression that I'm asking about is that, it sounds like the grade, has been designed to match the maximum grade allowable for those requirements. But my kind of uneducated, again, impression just looking at it in person was that the grade might be acceptable, but the total elevation gain from the bottom to the entrance was so great that it would take quite the athlete to be able to actually use it. And so I don't know if I was curious if there's a requirement on, that reflects that sort of total elevation change or something like that, would be acceptable for a ramp. And so I was curious, because it kind of reflects whether the application is made in good faith, I guess is my question there.
I don't have that, but I can have cursory review by our building official. I mean, these are not submitted building plans, so he'll probably provide a caveat, but with the continued application, I can provide a update on that.
Any other questions for staff? All right, in that case, we'll then move into the public comments and we'll invite the applicant to speak. Again, you have up to 15 minutes if you can state your name and place of residence.
So do I have to introduce myself again?
If you could, for the record.
Okay, so yes, my name is John Delson. I'm the design engineer and the engineer of record on this project. And we've been lucky to work with this project for a couple of years now. And we are happy to see the progress, and the building has been approved. Right now, there is so much confusion about this accessibility. So I would like to take a couple minutes to explain briefly, if I can, the main issues with this project. So as you know, the building is located in on such a lot that topography goes from facing the building from the front, from the 5th Street, from the top left to the bottom right. Okay, and then because of the HRB requirements and guidelines, we could not create 2 entrances up in front. Okay, so because we are in a mixed zone, the lower level, the ground level, we could call it the basement, is dedicated to the commercial space. Residential, we could only put on the upper level due to the topography. We could put on the upper level, which is the 2nd level. So 2nd and the 3rd level are residential. And since we learn about the family needs of the owner, and I think the owner provided adequate documentation that she needs to take care of her elderly mother, who is 90 something, and the brother, about 70 years old. And she's in medical field, so she expressed the need and desire to provide the care. So she requested from us to provide a study and the best possible approach or design that to meet the ADA standards and the building code, and possibly mitigate the HRB requirements. So looking at the lot and the topography as the lot aggressively slides from the left to the right, not only that, the lot is located in geohazard zone. So we are limited with the height of the retaining wall. Okay, so this is given, although we have done independent study by independent geoengineer, and we could, technically speaking, we could do perhaps taller wall, but according to the guidelines and everything, we stayed with all these guidelines, city requirements and so on, and this was the best configuration we could possibly do. However, because it was so much confusion from HRB and this discussion, how to shorten this ramp, how to minimize this ramp, I have done independent study. What if we provide the access on the left side of the building, which is upslope? Now, somebody with a few years of experience in design or engineering does not need the study, does not need to see the paper. Just looking at the lot can clearly see right from the beginning that on this side, it will not going to happen, simply for many restrictions, geohazard, height of retaining walls, and even actually the cost and space. Super difficult, super expensive. But we are limited again by the height, allowable height of retaining wall. And Christina Robertson is familiar with this, knows about this, because we had to limit the height of the walls to 6 feet, concrete walls. And that picture that require a couple of days or maybe a week from us to provide a simple drawing and the calculations of the heights that clearly show. Again, for me, this was not necessary. For building official or inspectors who are dealing with similar situation, there is no question whatsoever in their mind. I have 33 years of experience in this field in this country. And then it was clear that the approach from the left side is not visible. However, we provided the design for the sake of clarity and to present to HRB these options. So on this side, we show how the grade should work and what kind of retaining wall height we would have to provide to be able to protect or hold the existing ground. It is clearly impossible. Okay, so the back of the house can be accessed only through helicopter or a drone, okay? Because on the left side, we have a health path or something. It's not street, it's never gonna be the street developed. So left side is kind of open and unprotected as a walkway simply. So the right side practically can be only utilized to access the building residential level, which is on the upper level. Comparing to the street level, and the street goes from left to right at the slope about 3 to 4 feet. So to provide the ADA compliant ramp, we are limited with the slope, and the slope is 1 to 12. It means 1 inch vertical, 12-inch horizontal. For every inch of the height, we have to provide 1 foot depth. So for example, if the grade goes 3 feet, 36 inches, we have to provide 36 feet long ramp, okay? So that being said, if we were able to provide the ramp on the left side, the ramp would be shorter, let's say 36 or 48 feet in length or depth, okay? But this is impossible, clearly impossible. So we provided like a walkway on the right side of the building, and HRB calls this ADA accessibility. And this is by no means ADA accessibility because it does not meet ADA standards or any building code standards. And we had an independent meeting with building official, Oregon City building official, James Sawyer, and he reviewed the plans and the file, and he put the note for HRB to review that says the door at the right north side of the building is not an accessible entrance. The path to the door via ramp is accessible. However, the door configuration does not allow for accessibility per ICC NC A117.1. So again, for the design professional, it is clear from the get-go that so-called ADA provided accessibility is acceptable. It's not. And as a design professional, I feel obligated to provide such a access to meet the code. And apparently, because of the lot location, lot configuration, topography, and everything, we have to compromise something. But we cannot compromise geometry, or we cannot compromise ADA standards. My understanding is, because I come from Europe, actually from Poland, I was a design professional in that country, in Germany, Czechoslovakia, and some other countries, then on commercial projects and residential projects. And in this country, ADA acts prevail over any other local codes and jurisdictions. And then and frankly, considering the whole situation that we are facing, elevator is not an option for us. Why not? Because this kind of exits, egress, and access is required during emergency. And during emergency, like fire, earthquake, heavy windstorm, or a power shortage, nobody can use any electrical operated lift or elevator. Even commercial type elevators do not qualify. So besides, the owner is already upper 60s-year-old, and she's not comfortable with any of those kind of equipments. Chairlift is included in this. She wants just simply mechanical, very simple, standard way of access that cannot be affected by fire, earthquake, heavy windstorm, or power shortage. Power shortage do happen. My understanding is sometimes can last a week or two. And or simple mechanical problem. As we know, all the parts come from China. Sometimes it takes a month or two to fix something. So simply they don't want to deal with this. And again, we are limited by the design, by the topography, by the location, only to the residential portion, to the second level. And no, we are not planning to provide access to the third level. No, second level, one level is enough for the owner to accommodate the family needs. And because, of course, the ground level, commercial level is excluded, the only option that has been designed and provided and constructed is residential on the second level. Now, from the elevation of the front of the house and from the street to the upper level, it's about 12 to 13 feet. We can look at the numbers and the design. 12 to 13 feet. If we multiply, say 12 feet by 12 inches, and then we multiply by 12 again, we get how long this access needs to be. However, we understand that even historical building, not so-called historical or new construction and called historical for some reason, but historical buildings in many countries, many states, and locally sometimes are adopted to public use, and they has to be provided ADA access. So libraries or other commercial projects. And in such case, simply historical building that has been for 200 years or much longer has to be altered the best possible way to accommodate the needs. However, we have new construction. And as we notice from this map, it's on fringes of historical zone. What it means that my understanding is that surrounding buildings are not by no means historical. Why? We don't know who provided this delineation. However, it is what it is. But we understand that we are entitled because of location, because we are on the fringes of so-called historical district. We are counting on at least some ways to compromise some of the standards. Something needs to be compromised. In other words, because geometry is the same. I mean, the calculations and the standards. The standards cannot be compromised. We cannot increase the slope. We cannot rotate the building or do anything about this. Simply from design and engineering point of view, we do not see any better approach. So we listened to the HRB comments, and we eliminated the deck. We had the deck and the roof over this deck. Why? Because occupants of this building do not have access to the front, to the left, to the right. They cannot see the daylight. They cannot go outside on a deck because the deck is not allowed. We even cut the deck, cut the roof, which would be very, from a health perspective and occupant usage would be very important. However, we decided that the ramp will be priority over the deck. So we cut the deck and we shrink the ramp to the minimum, basically. We do have the length, and the length, as I said, is dictated by the height. And there is nothing, nobody can do anything about that. So we utilize this length, and the ramp is somehow hidden behind of the building. So from the 5th Street, nobody can see the ramp, which is covered by the building, unless somebody has an X-ray vision. On the left side, there is no public access. On the right side, it is a Guild Mortgage building. And then we provide the landscaping screening, if possible. So from the right side, my understanding is, or from Monroe Street, the ramp should not be visible, as you can see on the rendering, and also on the picture. We have one picture. Christina did show a couple of pictures from the up and down location, and we simply don't see the backyard. On the backyard is this ramp, which will be hidden. So we see that from practical point of view, this ramp will be invisible. Only except one neighbor, which is on the top, and the other building, if it is historical, we will leave it up to HRB. And how to balance all the needs and current conditions to be able to come up with some kind of a reasonable solution. So I will leave this up to HRB. I just wanted to add also that because we are in the geohazard zone, the window of construction closing at the end of October. So if we don't get approval this time, it means that we cannot build this year. It would be end of April, I believe, next year, when we could come back. The building is near completion, except we are facing brick wall with this issue right now. And then after the sequence will be like so. We get green light from HRB, which we are hoping for. Then we need to present the specifications, structural plans of this ramp that needs to be reviewed very quick by the building department to allow the construction of this ramp. But the construction excavation needs to be finished before the end of October. So this is another challenge, very large challenge for us, because it means that the occupants between October and next year will not be able to have the building that would serve the needs. Will not be accessible and will not serve the needs from the family. Any questions for me? Because it seems like something might be hidden, some information, or not clear. We will find out after you express your opinion in a couple of days or something. But at that time, I don't get if something is not clear. Like, for example, which level of the building is residential, to which level we go to the second or the third. Questions like this, or any other questions that would be addressed today, not a couple of days from now or next year.
Sure. So I guess right off the bat, first question in the staff recommendation was to continue this application and request that you come back with answers to some of those additional questions, and also that you extend the 120-day date for a final decision on the application by an additional 30 days. So, but based on your, I guess, your comments of needing to try to complete construction before winter, it doesn't sound like you're very amenable to that, or at least didn't want to do that. So I guess the first question is, are you open to continuing the hearing to October 25th and extending that 120-day deadline?
what I say, it's not up to me necessarily. You know, I am outside person. There is owner, future occupants, and so on, and the builder. I presented the information that basically, if we don't get square this question and answer right now, we cannot proceed with this until half a year from now or more. So I could say yes, I would have to get second from the owners or the builder, representing owner. It does not applies to me personally, you know. So, but my question is, what else we could explain from the ADA standards or technical standards or any other that I could help right now rather than next year sometime.
Okay. Christina, do we know what is the 120-day date?
Sure, I can look at we're only 30 days into the 120-day process, but knowing how long the appeal took last time, we just want to ensure that the board has the ability to make decisions in a way that doesn't constrain them by deadlines. So that was my recommendation. Secondly, the applicant still has an approval to build the ramp to the side door if they want to break this project up in two and risk if the design changes or there's mitigation. But I did advise the applicant that their timeline was a little quick for their proposal coming in the end of August. But let me give a quick check for the 120. Give me 1 second.
Okay. While staff is doing that, I guess another question that I have is, have you requested and received any bids on other alternative solutions, whether that be chairlifts, residential elevators, any other potential solutions that you may have thought of? And did you get pricing on those and did some sort of trade study on how they compared to the ramp?
As I mentioned before, this egress or access will be used in case of emergency. My understanding is 100%, there is no question, no doubt, that in case of emergency, what is emergency? It's fire, it is earthquake, it is heavy windstorm, it is lack of power. Okay, for these 4 reasons, no elevator can be used in residential projects. No elevator. There has not been designed or built elevator up to date. Actually, to clarify or extend, there is no elevator for commercial either. In case of earthquake, you cannot use any lift. You cannot use any lift. And commercial, yes, as far as elevator, has different guidelines than residential. In residential, it is strictly regulated, my understanding, by elevator code. And there is no elevator for residential that could be used in case of emergency. There is no lift. There is nothing like this electrically operated. But my understanding is to extend, which is beyond what we're discussing. Even for commercial, you cannot use elevator in case of emergency. And I define what is emergency: fire, earthquake, windstorm. Well, power shortage, everybody understands. Somebody said, okay, well, maybe you can have generator. Okay, I'm an engineer and I built in the past. I know about this, but I would not use in my house. I would not use in my house. Yeah. So, but my understanding is from my 33 years of experience, I never seen, never done, never heard of electrical lift in residential to meet the ADA standards. So
sure.
yes.
So I guess I definitely have, follow-up questions on that in terms of whether that's a reasonable accommodation or not. I mean, I've been in a lot of buildings today included that had stairs and they had an elevator, but they definitely didn't have, and they were, ADA accessible buildings.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
having that type of egress, I guess I have some questions about whether that's a reasonable request and how we
That's
should weigh that against the other.
But if you go into any elevator and look, each elevator has sign. Each elevator has sign. Do not use in case of fire, earthquake, or any disaster. Correct. So the owner is simply not interested in halfway. To everybody, there are different standards. They want simply the simple and reliable solution that would not conflict with or prevent them, okay, to take care of elderly person. Okay, hey, we have the lift. The power is okay, but something broke. Okay, sorry, we cannot have. We cannot have medical help. We cannot transport the person. We cannot do anything. So this is out of the question for the owners.
Sure. Okay. Understand your position. Go around the board here. Paul has his hand up. Board Member Egger.
Thank you. I thought I heard you say that the owners have agreed that they would put the people that had special needs on the second floor, not on the third floor, and that would be adequate. Is that a correct statement that I heard?
This is correct.
So in that case, we could potentially take the original approved ramp that goes to the second floor and install that, and it would be then therefore adequate for meeting the needs of having ADA access and egress by just doing what has been already approved.
Just a clarification, sorry. The approval in 2001 was to a door on the first floor that led to stairs to the second floor.
Okay, but is there an ability to do a minimized second floor ramp?
Well, that's what the applicant's proposing.
Okay, well, I thought it was including to go up to a
No.
third floor.
No.
Okay,
The applicant is proposing their newest version of a ramp to the rear of the house on the second floor.
and we still don't know what the length of that is. And did I understand him to say that that it may not in itself be approved based upon the grade of the ramp to meeting ADA standards?
Yes, what we are proposing does meet the ADA standards and the building standards. But again, to clarify, I think I already highlighted a couple times that what HRB was calling ADA access is by no means ADA access. So access on the right side leading to the staircase is by no means ADA access. This is the whole confusion, I think. That's why we asked James Sawyer, the building official, Oregon City building official, and he put the clarification note citing the code, required applicable codes, that the door at the right side is not accessible entrance.
And between now and the next, if there is a next hearing, at the next hearing that this is involved in, I can provide additional comment from Jim Sayers, our building official.
I guess go around to the rest of the board. Is board member Stobie or Ferry, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Leaving aside other alternatives, which I do think should be addressed. In this latest proposal, you have quite a deep planter, and there is a small little elevation change between the landing, one landing and then a second landing that is on the end of the planter. Is the reason that you need the planter is that you need that little bit of elevation change? Or could the planter be removed and the 3 switchbacks be pushed closer together?
Yes, we cannot squeeze it, so to speak, or push together, because the ramps are dictated by those standards. And between the landing is the maximum stretch that can be. And we went to the maximum stretch. And this is the minimum amount of landings.
Yeah.
The landing cannot be too short or too far. Too many landings, we are losing the height.
Yeah.
But we have to provide the landing at a certain distance. So we said, okay, we will have additional area that is unusable, except we'll provide the screening if necessary.
Yeah, I think one of the problems was the sort of how far the ramps came off the back of the house, and so that hasn't changed much.
And to clarify this, we cannot push the ramp to the left more because the grade is going up too aggressively. So you know, if we are on the level land, a totally different talk, totally different problem. But we have the sloping condition, which dictates the design.
Understood. Thank you.
And there is no way anybody can fight with the existing sloping conditions, and they are classified as a geohazard. So to minimize the impact on a geohazard, the ramp is the best way, because we have isolated footing that do not put much pressure on the ground. Okay, basically like it's on the sticks, on 18 by 18 footing, spread as much as the carrying member can require. So that's the minimum impact on the ground. And the minimum impact from the 5th Street also, as far as visibility, because unless somebody can see through the building, cannot see the ramp. Yes, can see the walkway, the path, but this not appear as a ramp. This is like a walkway, elevated walkway. And again, the walkway has to be like this because the ground is going too much down, even if there was no ADA accessibility there. So the access to the back of the building has to be on this kind of elevated walk. That's all what it is.
Yeah, I understand. Have you thought about alternative materials or considered alternative materials?
Yes. So we are proposing a cedar wood, and use the natural cedar wood in appearance to match. If we need to cover the railing and guardrails, we can match the siding of the house.
I'm just wondering if covering it with the siding that is the same as the house makes it appear to be larger than maybe it would be if you used a lighter, more like a see-through material, such as a metal railing with balustrades. I don't know if this is necessarily would meet our design guidelines, but I do wonder if a different material could be utilized to sort of lighten up the appearance of the ramp.
It could be, if there is no other suggestion or alternative, we could consider a metal wrought iron. It is hard to say what would be less impacting, what appearance, but from cost point of view, the wrought iron is definitely higher. But we could use it if this is the recommendation of HRB to meet the requirements, whatever it takes.
Well, I would love to see.
We are open to any suggestion, and we are willing to provide this way, or the material is not the problem. Material is not a problem. Yeah.
I'd love to see an alternative material, but I'd also love to just
Yeah.
see better drawings that sort of show what this ramp actually looks like in, you know, inside view, where you would see it coming up Fifth.
Yeah.
And from that.
So by the code, the height of the rail cannot be 36 to 38 inch high. We need to provide the grab bars. And this would be, yes, so a certain diameters, distances, and so on. And it is squeezed to the minimum. But the landings have to be 5 by 5. There is no alternative to that. And the spacing of the landing also. It is regulated by standards. So our design meet the standards and guidelines. Other things like material, I'm pretty sure the owner can do anything possible just to have it.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Yes, you're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicant? In that case,
So-
then we'll, oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
So if I can add, I got the text from the contractor, the metal is good. If the HRB decides in favor of metal railing, we can design and construct metal railing. But the spacing of the railing, openings and so on, everything is regulated.
My question is does the initial, I don't have a good visualization of the landing. Where does it come right out onto the sidewalk or at
Yes.
that?
So
Is there a way that it could come off of at a higher level off of the porch floor? So where I'm coming, where you come down and you put a 5 by 5 landing, and then at the height of the floor of the porch, and that would then raise up, eliminate a significant amount of the length by allowing the people to get onto the porch and then roll over and then go up the ramp off of the porch.
this is a good question. However, there is no such an option. The porch is elevated. I cannot tell you right now how much comparing to the street level. So we would have to create a ramp in front of the porch to be able to get on the ramp, on the porch level. So, so we proposing, and with the original discussion with the city jurisdiction and all the regulations, we provided concrete on-ground access up to the face of the building. And from that, from the corner of the building, we can do wood constructed walkway. This is the only way to accomplish that. Physically, it's not possible. To short answer what you asked, physically, it's not possible to do something like this.
I was gonna say, Paul, if you look at figure 4, I don't see how that's possible where the level of the porch is, or the height of the porch, and where that sits in relative to where the ramp might go, and the side door and windows.
Correct. I feel like we exhausted any options with the ramp.
Okay, so I don't want to belabor the point, but I guess I'm a little confused now. The porch itself is accessible from the driveway side, correct?
It's not, per ADA standards is not.
Isn't
And
so?
according to the code, it's not required.
So my understanding was that the space in the front door from the porch was commercial space, in which case it would be required since this is a mixed-use building.
Not necessarily, it depends on the occupant load and the situation. We've been through this with the city jurisdiction, and it was never required, and it's not required also by the occupants. The nature of the business that the owner is intending to conduct and the occupant load does not dictate or requires. So the only thing is the residential portion, because of the family situation, does require ADA access.
The question really is, it may not be dictated, as you were saying, but if in fact that is a alternative where we could, because the whole porch in itself has to be ADA accessible. And all we're saying is that if the driveway on the left side could be made accessible, and then on the right side of the porch, I could create your 5x5 platform and then extend along the right side of the building. It is an option if that it could potentially somehow be done. Ray may see something that I'm not looking at, but all I'm thinking about is reducing the height of this and making a integrated ADA access across the whole front of the building. And if that's could be engineered and it's affordable, could it be considered as an option?
Okay, so from the code perspective, for the approval up to date, there was no requirement like that, and we never consider option like this. But this will create, thinking about this will create a ramp in front of the existing building, not behind. There would be a ramp in front of the building, which will change the landscaping and all the other requirements, and even design. And frankly, in my opinion, if we come up with something, it would be much more
Yeah, I guess,
ugly.
I think the issue, I mean, even if that were viable, I think it would have to be level for the section from the porch to the side door, because they're on the same height there. And otherwise, if you started elevating from the porch height along the side of the building, the ramp would be halfway up the door, over the windows, going up the side, so it wouldn't probably make sense anyway. I guess in interest of keeping things moving, unless any other questions for the applicant, we can move to any other public comments.
Wendy?
Hello, once again, I'm Wendy Marshall, and I am a resident of Oregon City, and I'm speaking on behalf of McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. We support the staff report, and in general, the need to continue and allow the applicant to submit the numerous pieces of information that have not been submitted to date after several years, and the new stuff that is coming up. And I do want to add a little bit more detail to that. We need a descriptive narrative. The small email really doesn't describe anything. A lot of Mr. Delson has provided a lot of verbal information and answers here, and I think they all need to be in the record or in the written record. And along with that, the drawings are not described. There were several different drawings, confusing which one is the proposal. It needs to be described. Mr. Delson also did read or maybe an excerpt by from the building official. That really should be included in the packet as well, so we could see the entire memo and gain some understanding. And along with that, I would like Mr. Delson to clarify that the ADA ramp to the side door, it sounds like the door itself perhaps is not wide enough, and it's not the ramp itself that's not compliant. It's the fact that the door is not wide enough. I would like that to be written in the next submittal in the narrative. Regarding the alternatives analysis, once again, these have been requested over and over for years, and Christina has outlined everything in the staff report. And I want to add something that I think maybe hasn't really been stressed. A couple of board members have touched on it, but not only do we need an alternatives analysis, and that's simply cost analysis. It's not generally, it's not anything too complicated. We need to, it's imperative to include the ramp. We need to include in that comparison, the ramp, everything that supports it, walls, guardrail, supports, screening, concrete work, landscaping, all of those things for that really massive ramp need to be included in the comparison. And we acknowledge that some of the elevator options are probably expensive, even though no cost data has been given whatsoever. But I think that the massive, complicated ramp system is also going to be expensive, and maybe even more so expensive than some of the alternatives we have looked at. And that needs to, that's why the ramp itself as proposed has to be included. And I'm sure there are actual bids for the work because the building is nearing completion. So I think it's reasonable that that is readily available. It was touched on the gap in the front on the 5th Street, because we have steps that are constructed. I don't know if they're permanent yet. We have the public sidewalk that's constructed, and we know we're really working with some tight area to get our slopes. I think that needs to be added to the drawing because it is constructed. Elevations can be shot and provide dimensions and elevations to make sure that that front part can also meet ADA, and we're not ripping out brand new work out right after it's completed. And as Mr. Delson knows, that ADA tolerances are absolute. You don't have any wiggle room. So if you're designing to the absolute minimum or maximum, you can't exceed it, and it's hard to do under construction. So just that needs to be kept in mind. Regarding the construction window for work in the wet weather, it's been like 4 years since I've worked in the city as a civil engineer, but I believe you can get some variance to that, and it can be allowed. I just don't recall, but usually there's a way to get a variance if you do additional erosion control measures and to ensure that the wet weather and the rain won't cause excessive destruction when it's being done. So that's something that could be discussed with the city's geotech consultant and the Public Works Department. That would help with the until the spring that you mentioned. One other thing, and it reminded me, City of Gresham City Hall is 3 stories tall and stairs and elevators. And we did a demonstration one time, and what they came up with to help people to get from the 3rd floor in case of an emergency was like a large appliance dolly where you could strap a person on that might be disabled and get them down the stairs. And we had a demonstration, and a reasonably fit adult can get a disabled large person down the stairs that way. It was really interesting and a cheap alternative. And I don't really recall what it was called, but that could be in conjunction with like one of our M&A's memos, I think it was in 2021, had a little picture of a chairlift that was kind of a mini elevator. If you recall that, I had a photo of one. And I know, Mr. Delson, you said you're not aware of any that don't need power. I would think they would have some that you hand crank because, as you say, in a power outage, it wouldn't work. And also, I believe that a generator is a valid option. A lot of people do have generators on their homes. And I think that's all. Christina, I added a little more detail. I can do a supplemental memo if you want, or this could stand as is. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy? Okay, any other public comments? Okay, hearing none, or wait, maybe we got
I'm trying to.
Jolene.
There we are.
Yes, please go ahead.
My name is Jolene Maudlin, and I'm a neighbor in the McLaughlin neighborhood. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate the statements that have been made. I'm still looking forward to seeing the information that answers all 8 of those questions that were proposed. And I'd like to be able to, as I wrote in my essay, or my statement, want this to be able to work because I believe in ACDA, but I also think from the conversation that's been happening, you don't get to pick and choose whether ADA works for a building or not. That if it's ADA to get into the business, we need to be able to make sure that's part of the first floor. You don't get to just kind of pick and choose. That's addition to what I'd already written in my statement. I want to make sure that this happens. I want to make sure it's done right because when the residents need to get out and it's an emergency, we need to make sure that they can get out and they're safe. It's not something that's slippery, wet. They're stuck out there that, you know, we've got 11 residents that are in there. We need to get them out for a fire. So I'm all for it, but let's do it right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jolene. Any questions for Jolene? All right, and then finally, any last public comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll go back to the applicant. You do have up to 5 minutes if you would like to rebut any of that testimony.
There was a confusion about the width of the door. This is not the case. The width of the door is 36 inch, and we do have 36 inch, but simply the accessibility standards are not limited to the width of the door. The staircase and the whole space is already designed and built, and by no means it can be altered. So that's a short answer. But again, somebody who has some expertise in this area, just looking at the plans or looking at the existing situation, do agree, and there's no question about the width of the door. That's all what I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, John. So on that note, I think we've completed the public comments section. We did have support for the continuance suggested by staff. So because this is the first evidentiary hearing on this application, I think we are obligated to grant that continuance. John, I guess I will ask if you're able to approve on behalf of the applicant, the 30-day extension.
And just real
so-
quickly, it's December 31st is 120. So a 30-day extension would be January 31st or 30th. Forget what.
Okay, so yeah, John, I guess the question would be if you're able to approve that deadline for the final decision to January 31st.
Or 30th.
Or yeah.
Forget what. But hold on. January is 31 days.
I think again, I don't think we have any choice. So, but what I would love to see, what I would love to see that we explain all the plus and minuses, and we somehow come up with the compromise solution that will enable the owner occupy the house at the capacity it's required in the shorter time. But if there is by no means, or there is still misunderstanding and need for another meeting, that we have no choice except to approve it.
Sure. And I think we're all supportive of, would like to reach a good final decision and hopefully not have it be appealed to reach that deadline anyway. So hopefully we'll have a final decision next meeting. I guess we'll go around the board here and just clarify. So I think we are going to be asking for as much detail as possible on all of the questions that staff provided in the staff report, particularly the alternatives analysis. So the maximum amount of detail you can provide on cost, benefits, or pros and cons of any of those alternative solutions, whether they be elevators, chair lifts, the ramp, how they compare, so that whichever decision we arrive at, we can, everyone can say with certainty that that was the best solution for this structure to provide the necessary access. I think even though, it's normally outside of the scope of what we would review in HRB, but if we're kind of being asked to make design, I guess, considerations based on, for example, the egress with no power, I think it would be helpful if from maybe, I don't know, either from you or from staff, if we can get a little bit more clarity on what the requirements are and what is acceptable, and then how we should weigh that, is I guess maybe that's a question for Carrie too, is so the applicant stated a preference for a solution that provides egress without power. Is that a reasonable accommodation for us to consider, even if that's outside of what is required by ADA, or how do we weigh that? And it's kind of difficult for me to say, I guess. We'll go around to the other board members. Any other additional questions we want for October? Board member Edgar.
That was already last time, pros and cons.
I would like to just follow, get all the questions answered. I still think that the first floor, the questions of ADA access to the first floor equally have to be addressed. And right now with the steps, and I'm not clear that we have ADA access to the first floor. Anyway, I'd like to have all the questions answered. Thank you.
Board member Ferry.
I agree with everything that you just said, Chair Blythe, and everything that staff has proposed. I'd like answer to those questions. I think including the ADA access to the first floor would be interesting. I don't think, aside from possibly clearer drawings of what this actual ramp is going to look like, in the plan is very clear. The elevation on the side of the building that has the mortgage building next to it, the 1960s structure, that sort of visual isn't very clear. It's not sort of blocked in. It looks very light and airy because it's white like the background. If we could see it, how it's actually going to look, because those ramps, you're going to see them kind of go up and slope and come back, and you'll see a deck, and it would just really be nice to have a good visual on that, and possibly what sort of landscaping might be in the planter. That'd be great.
And board member Stubbe.
Nothing much more to say. There's I agree with everything the three of you have said. So for sake of time, let's move forward.
Okay, then Carrie.
Sorry, I want to follow up on something that board member Ferry was just talking about, and I think it would be really helpful for the applicant to hear exactly what you want. Do you want a rendering of a sightline view looking up Fifth, or do you or do you want revised elevation drawings that show either a sided wall on that rear ramp? Because I think that my understanding is that the ramp is shielded by a wall, and that's what the wall, so it will make it look like the whole side elevation wall continues on all the way to the back of the ramp. So you wouldn't see the ramp at all. It will be a sided wall. And I guess, I guess that is that, it would help me when I look at the elevation drawing to see that. Is that what you're thinking? And then would it be good to see that wall not there and a metal attached ramp where you would see the railings and the landings and that kind of thing. So I think it would be helpful for that to be real clear for the applicant.
I think that what I'd like to see is, yes, just a elevation rendering, an elevation drawing that actually shows the ramp with its siding. And I do think you'll see parts of the ramp, or at least you'll see the railings go up, right? As it kind of switchbacks, you'll see it go up in the back behind that initial wall that goes up the side of the house. You will see the switchback because you're having an elevation change. So the railings need to go up in height. The walls that, you know, possibly encase those railings, depending on the design of it. I don't know exactly what the structure of that's going to look like once you get past that initial wall. And I think what I'm just asking for is more clarity on what that's actually going to look like. Because I mean, I can envision the clapboard sided wall that goes along the side of the house, but I'm having trouble envisioning exactly what it's going to look like for that ramp and those railings to switch back along the back side of the house, what the planter is going to look like, because it will be elevated above that wall that goes along the side of the house, and what that little deck is going to look like up at the top. I mean, that's the thing that's clearest in the drawings is the actual railing. They've got like a balustrade railing that that goes along that, but it's really hard to sort of envision exactly what that's going to look like switching back, because you will see parts of it above the sidewall, or at least I believe you'll see parts of it. It would be nice to sort of clarify that. That's all I'm asking. And it would be nice to see an alternative material just to see if it would lighten it up a little bit, make it not feel quite so dense. I mean, perhaps screening it is the best alternative. I don't know.
And that would take a landscaping plan, right? So there would need to be a landscaping show, either a separate document entitled landscaping plan or landscaping identified on the elevation.
Well, I think that there's been a lot of talk about mitigation plantings. I don't believe that with the ramp that they're constructing, you'll be able to actually fit any landscape plantings between the ramp and the wall. None that I can think would survive like in a small space like that. But yes, it would be nice to know if there was plans for mitigation and what that might be. I'm guessing I'm thinking more about the planter that's in the back of the house, you know, that's in the ramp, you know. Are they going to have like a tree in it, or are they going to have like little flowers, you know? I mean, it kind of makes a difference as to what that backyard sort of looks like from coming up Fifth Street.
So you think that the plant, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. You think the planter will be, that planter in between the ramp will be visible from Fifth Street?
I think if you can see the back of the house, which it shows in Christina's photos that you can, that if there's something large enough in it, it might be visible. I don't know if it.
Oh, we lost you, Sabrina. We lost your.
Am I back or?
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. I don't know if it would mitigate any views. I'm just curious as to what, if I'm, yeah, I'm just curious. Does that help clarify?
And a rendering is a different document, a different piece of paper than a elevation drawing in your mind, right?
It is, yeah. A rendering is different. A rendering would be awesome, but I think an elevation drawing might be sufficient. Just a much clearer elevation drawing might be sufficient.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other final guidance before we have a motion to continue? All right, hearing none, I guess I will go ahead and move to continue application HR 2211 to a date certain of October 25th, 2022.
I second.
Board Member Ferry,
Aye.
Board Member Stobie.
Aye.
Board Member Egger,
Aye.
Chair Blythe,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, and I'll just comment too that the public record remains open for additional comment. Right, so that concludes the public hearing portion of the agenda. Then we'll move into communications.
I don't have anything to add for communications. I will send emails sometime this month about options for both the McLaughlin and Kenema neighborhood meeting to have one or two board members attend with me to present kind of the final discussion draft of the middle housing design guidelines that the board reviewed in their 6 o'clock meeting, but that is all I have. Aquila Hurd-Ravitch, our Community Development Director, do you have anything you want to add?
I do not. Thank you, though.
So that is all we have on our end for communication.
Okay, very good. Last call then. Hearing nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 9:22 p.m.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.